I think we're slowing down a little bit. Megan, let me know when you want us to get started.
Ready to go anytime you are.
All right. So then I'll officially say hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us here early this morning. I see that some of you are already on campus in your classrooms. I'm still cozy at home. But thank you so much for being here. We have a lot of material to cover in this hour, and I'm going to go ahead and start by introducing all of my co-hosts. And I'm on the wrong slides. Hold on just a second. Just like that doesn't look right. Let me bring up the right slideshow. Just a second. All right. It was all going so smoothly. Look at that. Technical difficulties already for me at 8 a.m. Okay. So now we're in the right presentation. Good morning again. I'm getting a little bit of feedback from somewhere. So this morning, our presenters are Sally Potter, Kristen Norton, Julio Trevino, David Hardison, and myself, Jackie Williams. The five of us wear a lot of different hats on campus, but the one thing that we all have in common is that we teach for the English departments. And that is how we came together on this project. And so what we did was create a sample course, and our presentation today is to kind of walk you through that process if you would like to create sample courses for your own discipline. So because we have over 70 people in the session today, we're asking that if you have any questions as we go through the material, please put those questions in the chat or hold them until the end. We're going to have a little bit of Q&A time at the end of the session. Did I miss any housekeeping things, team? Okay. All right. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of the project. This project came up from sort of organic conversations that we were having in the department about different experiences that we had had as new instructors, or every time we were given a new prep for a course. So I don't know about all of you, but myself, when I was first hired by the district as an adjunct, I was hired on Friday for classes that started on Monday morning, right? I've also taken over other classes as a long-term sub at least half a dozen times since I started teaching. And so there's frequently these instances where you are put into a class and you haven't necessarily had the time to prep for that class that you would if you had known, 6 months, a year out in advance that you were going to have that class. And so Michael Takeda, who is our current Academic Senate president, he really wanted to take this need that we found and turn it into something tangible that we could give to other instructors when the need arose. And so everything that you're going to see here is materials that the five of us came together to volunteer on the project, and we donated materials from our classes to create the sample course. And when we were putting it together, we didn't want it to just be something for brand new instructors, because we also, as instructors, are always looking for ways to bring new things into our classes as well. So we wanted this to be a resource that any instructor in our department could use, whether they had been teaching the class for 20 years or they were teaching it for the first time starting next week. We also wanted to make sure, as we were designing the materials, that we were doing so with an equity mindset. And so we'll be speaking today to some of the different things we did as a part of this project to make sure that this is going to serve all of our students. We wanted to make sure that even though we're sort of in that mindset right now of online design, that what we were making are things that could also be used in a face-to-face class. And so what we ended up doing as we worked through the project was creating 2 different Canvas shells for instructors to use. One of them is a plug and play class. So this is a class where you can take as little or as much as you need. And if you are looking for a whole curriculum, you can take the entire class. If you're looking for a new lesson on a certain topic, then you can just pull out the materials for that lesson. So as little or as much as an instructor needs or wants to take from it, they can. And then we also did a second class that takes the same materials, but it restructures it and as a resources. And so if you're looking for something on a specific topic under English 1A, which is the class we designed this for, or if you're looking for a resource for improving the look of your Canvas, we have all of those things arranged into the resources class. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the different parts of this, and we're going to kind of go through in the order that we did the design. And so I'm going to turn it over to Sally, and she is going to talk about our process for gathering resources and putting together that resource module.
Okay, let's see here. I am not going to share my screen quite yet. Let me start talking first, and then I'll figure out where my window is. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking to you about is how we gathered our resources together. So first, I want to preface this by saying that when we first got started, we didn't know what we were doing. We just were given this task by Michael Takeda, as Jackie mentioned, and we were pretty excited about it. We're like, oh yeah, this is a good idea. But after we met, I think each of us maybe had a slightly different idea about the purpose of what we were supposed to be doing. And while we all knew each other, you know, working together on different projects in different capacities, we had never done anything like this before. And so it took us a little bit of time to kind of figure out the best way to get started. And so I think had we known, you know, what we were getting into, we could have been a little more efficient in the way that we were doing things. So the way I look at it is looking at the lessons that we learned and kind of what I would do differently next time if I were to do this again. I'm going to be talking about some of that stuff too. Okay, so we started with one shared Canvas sandbox that we all had access to as teachers. And we met together on Zoom for the first time, and we talked about, you know, the different kinds of things that we were going to do, different things that we were going to put in. Like I said, we were all excited. Oh yeah, I have this. And the idea was that we were going to add the materials that we had personally created ourselves. And so we left that meeting, and right away we started just throwing our materials in there. They were assignments, essay prompts, quizzes, even some kind of short self-contained modules in there. And I remember looking through it and just thinking, oh, this is a disaster. It was just unorganized, and you could really see each person's kind of separate style, kind of separate teaching style. And I thought this is never going to gel together, and I just don't even know what to do. I was a little overwhelmed by it. And I think it was after maybe our second or third meeting that we talked about it, and we figured out that we sort of, some of us were thinking we needed, we had one purpose in mind, and that was the sample course. And then the other purpose was for the plug and play. We really decided, okay, we really need 2 different courses because these really have 2 different purposes. So I'm going to be kind of focusing on the sample resources course. That was really what I was in charge of ultimately. So like I said, we started with our own stuff in there. And At first, we all started kind of organizing it. And I think we were almost kind of a little shy at first. I know that's how I felt, to kind of organize other people's things. I know, especially to edit other people's things, it's not easy to mess with other people's materials that they've created. You know, it's almost kind of disrespectful. Even though they've given you permission, it's hard to do that. So at first, it was slow going. But then as time started ticking away, then I know for me, at least, I got much more liberal about doing that, and it became a little more easy. And then especially as I was given the job of kind of organizing that stuff, then it got faster and faster. So that's one thing that I would say, is that probably a good idea is to have an initial meeting where you talk about the organization and what the organization should be, and then one person should kind of be ultimately in charge of doing the organization, because I think that would be much more efficient. What I ultimately started doing was to, as the organization kind of became clear, and as we started organizing things, the things that I didn't know what to do with, they just kind of got shoved to the bottom. And so there was kind of this stuff at the bottom that we didn't really know what to do with. And I think most of that stuff ultimately got pushed over to the plug and play course, which we'll show you in just a minute. So some clear modules then started to emerge, and the organization then started to gel. Then I think probably, I'm gonna guess that Jackie and Julio were doing some of the organization, but I was probably doing some more of it too. And then that's when I pulled out the course outline of record. Now let me back up just a second, because I'm the one here that is not in the English department. English is not my discipline. Okay, I do teach transfer level English. I teach English 1A, but it's not my primary discipline. And so I'm not as comfortable with it. So I went to the COR kind of after the fact. This is backwards. Okay, what I would suggest, another lesson learned, is to start with the COR, start with your outcomes and objectives, and make a map, or make, map that out, and then figure out what you need and look for resources that way. We were talking yesterday about our process and what we did, and David put this perfectly. What we did was more like a free writing assignment, where we just kind of threw everything out there and then tried to organize it. What would have been a more efficient way, maybe, was to start with an outline and then fill in the gaps that way. And I think that would have maybe worked a little bit better. Okay, so let me show you here. Let's see. Oh boy. Okay, I am going to take a second here. Okay, and I apologize. I'm going to share right here, so I can share, right? Am I sharing now? Yeah. Okay. So what I want to show you is this is our course that we created. And this is the homepage. I'll talk about the homepage in just a second. I ended up creating the homepage, and there's a little story about that. But I'm gonna start by going into the modules. And this is what it looks like here. So what we have are bunch of resources for instructors. what I wanted to show you were these sample syllabi. So this is an example of some different options that we had. These were our own materials that we had. And so we wanted to give instructors some different options. Now, of course, this is, not meant to be, these people using this exact, these exact syllabi, but Jackie and I have been through Marianne's equity training and Cora training, and so we felt confident in sharing our syllabi. And so Kristen is going to talk to you a little bit more about the equity pieces, but we uploaded our syllabi here, and then the other thing that I wanted to show you are these strategies modules. So what I was primarily responsible for were gathering these different pieces. And so there are 4 different modules here. I've got the reading, writing, attribution, which is research, and then sentence level analysis, which is grammar. And what we did was pull in all of our stuff, and then I went to the COR and looked for the objectives and outcomes, any gaps that were missing, and then I went to OER materials. And one thing that you have to understand about English 1A, transfer level English, there is a lot of OER books on this course. So many that it's a little bit overwhelming. So there's a lot of information out there. And so let me just walk you through some of this stuff that we have here. So this is a page that one of us had in our course. And this is from one of us pulled this from our course. These are all pages. And so the instructors are added to this as a teacher. So they're going to be able to pull these pages into their own course. Here's another one. So it's similar content. They can pick and choose what they want. This is from someone else's course. I can't remember. Oh, I think this is mine actually. Here's another one. So these are similar. It's not meant to be used in order. These are not meant to necessarily be used every single one. They can pick and choose. We used a lot of tabs, and we'll talk, Julio and David will talk about the technical part of that. I don't know how to do tabs. When I ran into something where I needed a tab, I just sent an email to one of them to fix my page for me. Here's another one that someone created. This is one that came from my course. This is an openly licensed essay that's attached here that I created from my course. Here's something that has something that I created from my course that has an openly licensed article that's attached to it, and a video that I actually created. So the instructor could use this, they could use my video, they could make their own video, they could take the video off if they want. And the video is like walking students through. This is something from an openly licensed textbook. So I have the licensing information at the bottom. Here's another one from another openly licensed textbook, and so on. It goes through. Okay. Now on the homepage I did create, and the story behind this is I was sitting, I was on vacation with my family at my in-laws' house, and I was just getting tired of them. And Jackie was totally overwhelmed with work. This is over the summer. She said, "Hey, you're pretty good at making home pages. Can you make a homepage for this course? I want them to be able to see everything that's on the page at a quick glance and be able to jump to things." And I said, "Okay, only if it means I can hide out in the bedroom and stay away from everybody." I said, "Yes, I will do it." So I created a table now and made the lines invisible and put all these elements in there. The problem with Canvas tables is that they don't work very well. So I did some research on Canvas, AKA called the help desk and had the IT person do the research on it. And they figured out the table properties and you have to set it up a certain way. And they did all the work behind the scenes for me. Basically, you have to fix the table properties so that they don't change when you add different elements in there. And then that way, when you change devices, they're stable. So what was happening is the right side cells would keep scrunching up depending on the different devices that you were on, and it just looked weird. But what we have here is, let's see, the things that I wanted to show you. Okay, so when you go to the sample syllabi, it takes you to the module of sample syllabi, I think, yeah. Oh, it's gonna be slow here. And then when you go to English 1A and 205 tips, it takes you straight to the page. So it's kind of a pick and choose type of a thing. And I was responsible for the organization of this homepage and kind of deciding, what elements should be on the front page and, what needed to be highlighted. And they all gave me feedback and everything, but I think that is really the way to go, is to have one person kind of in charge of this organization. Okay, and I think that's it. If you have any questions, I can talk to you in the chat about it, and then if you have any time at the end, we can talk about that too.
I just have a question, Sally. Can you hear me?
Yeah, let's wait until the end. Maybe write it down, or let's talk in the chat, because I just want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to go through their part.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
So Sally brings up a really good point about how we divided up the work, because there were 5 of us on the team, and that's kind of how we've divided up the presentation today. So the next section, as she mentioned, this is Kristen was overseeing this section of the design, and so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her.
Thanks, Jackie. Welcome, everybody, although you've already been welcomed. So I was working on the equity section as someone who had gone through EIFL before it became RAMREL. And since so many of the people in our group had done the equity training, we wanted to be sure that we included different equity-minded practices at the different stages of building a Canvas course. So people who were coming to FCC for the first time and weren't really familiar with necessarily all of the layers of equity that we had gathered through our EIFL and RAMREL training were able to find those resources very easily, and from there build some practices in their own classes, not just in the course design, but in other ways as well. So I want to share my screen, which looks exactly like Sally's, only I can click on it. Let's see. Okay. All right. And so in the homepage that Sally made, there's the equity resources, and there are several different links in here. And so the creation of these links, I pulled from several different sources, and they're all listed right here. And then I think they are distributed throughout the plug and play. Are they, Jackie? Are they also there? Yeah. Okay, so you can find them in either place, but they're organized in a particular order here in this Canvas shell. And so we pulled these from, I pulled these with the help of Sally and Jackie from some different sources. So if you were to go to the Equity Minded Teaching overview page, it has FCC's definition of equity. It has a video by Marianne Valentino, who is the lead facilitator for the RAMREL. the RAM Equity Lab. And then it has links to all of the different pages as well. So the equity guide overview really kind of sets the stage for the thinking around equity work at FCC. And then the next slide is creating an equity-minded syllabus, which is a key component of the RamRail program. But when I put this together, I use the resources that RamRail used, which is the Center for Urban Education at USC. So they have a really nice syllabus review guide, and I put that together. I'm gonna just share my screen. So if you're interested in looking at the original source, it's very easy to go there. And you just give them some information so they can track who's using it. They don't ever talk back to you or send you emails that you don't want or anything. And so I pulled a lot of the resources for the syllabus guide from this document right here. And then we decided to set up all of the equity-minded pages the same way. So the objective is pretty consistent from page to page. And talking about how this is some best practices. It's definitely not intended to be a comprehensive checklist, right? I had to pick and choose. There was a lot of good information out there. And so definitely this is not a comprehensive checklist, but it is kind of an entryway to begin to think about equity-minded practices at all stages of our course development. And so then each page will have the goals or the equity-minded best practices, right? So what do you want to look for as you're creating your syllabus? And so there's different categories and things to consider. And then at the bottom is the to-do list, which is really some reflective questions about how you are already implementing these practices or how you would like to implement these practices as you revise your course, revise your syllabus, that sort of thing. And then at the bottom are the different citations that the information was taken from. So the equity-minded syllabus mainly came from Q and the page that I just showed you.
We're still seeing the homepage. Are you in the page? I don't know. The screen shares.
I always do that. I switch and then I forget to switch back. My students are like, we're not seeing what you're seeing. Okay. Here we go. So yeah, so the objective and then the goals and then the to-do list. And then down here is the citations or attributions rather for the work. So the next one is selecting course texts. And obviously Sally's a great expert on OER and how to use those resources. But in thinking about, so that's one of the very first things to consider, but also thinking about, the diversity of the texts themselves. So one of the other really great resources, and here I'm about to move away from the main one again, so if I forget to come back, let me know, was the OER, ASCCC OER, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism Audit. They had a lot of great resources. And so this was another place I pulled from to get the information and synthesize that into what I thought were pretty manageable pieces around each of the different topics. So rather than take you, well, maybe I'll just take you through because I think you can read them better. You can see this better than you can see the homepage. So there's equity-minded practices for selecting course texts and what to think about as you do that. Equity-minded communication strategies. And we thought this was really important because it's not just about building the Canvas shell, but it's about some ways to consider how you interact with students in some really essential ways that go beyond course instruction and just in the way that you talk with them. And so these are some best practices for just how to interact with students from your classes. And then there's the instructional strategies, which is different. So ASCCC OER, I had some very different categories, and I thought these were two different ways. They had very different sets of information, right? How to deliver instruction versus how to just interact and make your students feel valued and important in ways that perhaps they weren't used to in their previous educational experiences if they've come from other systems. And then there's the one for assignment and rubric design, which I think is the last one, because this would be the, they're kind of designed to go in order. First, you would have your syllabus and you would choose your resources, and then you would communicate with students and have instructional strategies and ultimately design assignments and rubrics to grade those. So this kind of takes you through the whole process of designing a course and gives you ways to consider aligning it with best practices for equity, diversity, and inclusion. I didn't get a chance to see if there were any questions in the chat, but if there are any questions about this work, please feel free to drop them in there.
Thank you, Kristen. So I hope that as you were looking at the pages that Kristen was showing, you noticed the beautiful consistency of those pages as we move from page to page. And that actually takes us to our next topic, which was the creation of that template that you saw. And so I'm going to turn that over to Julio.
All right, so as has already been discussed by Sally, Kristen, and Jackie, when we started this project, we were given very specific parameters. And part of that was we had 20 hours over the summer in which to do this. And every one of us on this team looked at each other and said, we always promise we're going to take some time off in the summer, and then we always take on projects because that's just who we are. So we tried to hold each other and ourselves to those 20 hours. And the best thing that we can come up with was to divide the team after we dumped all of the data in. Immediately, one of the things that I noticed was the user interface. Because so much of the material was coming from so many different people, the user interface, which is how our students interact with our pages, was widely different. And so the first thing that came to mind is we need to standardize this. We need to have some kind of standard template for every type of page so that the information changes, but the overall look stays the same. And that's something that I think we really want to champion for anyone who's trying to do this in their own division or with their own departments. Try to keep a user interface that's very standard throughout the entire experience. And this does several things. As the semester continued on for myself, this semester, I was using a lot of material from here. So I went into my classes and changed all of those templates to match this one. So anytime I snagged material from the resource page or the plug and play one, it just embedded perfectly with my user interface, and my students couldn't even visually see that it came from somewhere else. This is our section for templates and samples, and we went through and created templates for pretty much everything that you would need for an online course or any kind of experience through Canvas. We have...
Julio, I don't think we're seeing your screen.
I'm sharing. What are you seeing right now, Jackie?
I see mine. Let me stop sharing. There we go. You're up now.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So this is our template page, and we have templates for pretty much everything that we can think of that would be needed for a completed course. This is our template for the overview page at the start of any unit/module, and we wanted to model best practices for people in our department as well, right? And so best practices say that we should do things like outline the unit or module objectives/goals for that unit or module, give a note to students about work that is going to be submitted for that module, bring in a to-do list so that students know when material is due for that weekly module or for that unit. Just a starting page to let people see, or our students see, what it is that they're going to be working with. We took into consideration also things like our school colors. because we wanted to make it as standard as possible. And so from our Fresno City College homepage, under faculty and staff, and it takes a little bit of thinking to get their resources and forms, we have our graphics section, and that includes the manual graphics standards that our college adheres to. I went in there and took the color palettes for any kind of web page experience, including Canvas, and used that to create or inform the template. All of the HTML code is embedded in everything that is in the template in terms of, where is it? There it is. Colors. This is the A800 red that we use for our web material. Took a lot of work, took a lot of time, but once we had that template, we were able to just copy and paste any template from anywhere else and just take the information and immediately adhere it to the template. Some of these templates also have further instructions on how to use or create the template, because as I think somebody noted in the chat, while we have been given a lot of instruction as to best practices for Canvas and user interface, we've not been given a lot of instruction on things like HTML code, on things like how to make our pages reflect a specific user interface. We have some material with the HTML codes as well in our resources. Here is the section on HTML codes. And let's just do the drop letter. So this is the HTML code for a tab page with a drop letter look, and you'd be able to just click on edit, switch to HTML, copy all of that and paste it into whatever page you need it to, or you can just copy the page itself, go in there and change the text that you'd like to change. I'm not going to make the change, obviously, because we want the template to say. But once we created the template and streamlined the user interface, all of the information that we were pulling together from each other's courses was able to coalesce in a more or less cohesive, standardized look. I don't know if there's anything else that anyone in the
I'm
group
gonna
wants
add
to-
on like one little caveat to
Uh-huh.
depending on how you decide to implement the new content. If let's say you're changing the formatting of existing content, the benefit of that is that you get to keep all of the other little metadata that's attached to your course content. Let's say assignment dates, due dates when it's available, points to assignments. So it's worth kind of weighing which approach you want to take, if you want to use the formatting and then reformat your existing content or copy and paste your existing content into the template. You just know that you have to, if you use the template and you want to copy your existing content into the template, then you'll have to go and check, make sure all of the little information at the bottom of the page is consistent to what you want it to be.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you both. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take over the screen share again. So hopefully you're seeing my screen now. So once we had all of the materials gathered and we had all of the best practices, we had all the templates, everything in place that an instructor could use to build a course from the ground up, we also decided that we were going to go ahead and add one additional piece to that, which is a model of a student orientation. So for those of you who've been teaching online, for everyone, right, who made that sudden turn to online teaching, our students included, you know, there were gaps in students' knowledge of using the online system. There were gaps in our own knowledge of what Canvas was capable of doing. And so, you know, the need to sort of orient students to the campus and to Canvas really arose and became a priority for a lot of us. And in speaking to my colleagues that are going back to campus on Monday, I know a lot of folks are planning on using beginning of next week to orient their students to the new realities of being on campus. And so we wanted to make sure that we provided a resource so that everyone could get started off on the right foot. So if we look back at those, excuse me, I'm in the wrong course, resources and templates. Can you see my canvas? Great.
Yes.
Okay. So what we did is we also included Canvas orientation, links to Canvas orientation and resources that the campus had. And so if you click on those, you can see it takes you down to a module about getting started in Canvas. And so this is something that we thought any instructor could embed into their course, as much or as little of this as they felt that their students needed in order to help their students get started on the right foot. So for the brand new student, right, we have this sort of like introduction to Canvas, and then how to get all of your basic things set up. So how to turn on their notifications, how to use the calendar to see their assignments, how to understand that to-do list that shows up, how to use the inbox to send messages. I mean, I'm sure that you've had similar experiences, but I use announcements. And so I tell my students how to subscribe to announcements, and then I'll get messages at week 10 and students will ask me a question that I just sent out in announcements. So I know they're not subscribed, right? I get questions about how to view their grades. And so we included all of that here so that you could just put this information into your class at the start, have students go through this and have them be really oriented to Canvas as a learning management system. And again, we're thinking about students who are in an online class exclusively, but this is also helpful for students that are in a face-to-face class that uses Canvas as a supplement. So if you're having students do homework on Canvas or take quizzes on Canvas, it's still really helpful for them to be oriented to the system. So like everything else in the course, you can take as much or as little of this as you need and embed it into your own course to share with students. So we also have a resource on how to set your pronouns in Canvas. And many of these things are either taken from FCC student resources or from the Canvas community resources pages. We included a link to the campus's online student readiness. So especially for us teaching English 1A, we get a lot of brand new incoming students in that class who are not familiar with online learning at FCC. And so this is really important. So if your class that you're designing for is also a first semester freshman type course, you know, this is something that you can include. And the great thing is, right, it has a badging system. So if I assign this and then you assign this, say in your math class, it's the student only has to do it once and they're going to earn those badges. And the same thing with the passport to Canvas orientation. So these are all resources that already existed. And really all we did was bring them together into one place, into that module, so that an instructor could take that module, plug it into their class, and that would allow them to sort of get students started in Canvas without having to stop and answer a lot of individual questions. And it's going to help the students in all of the different classes that they're taking that use Canvas either completely or as a supplement on the side. All right, let's see. Can't remember if that's the last thing. And someone asked in the chat if we included the virtual hub, and we do have that in here as well. So all of those resources for students, we wanted to make sure that we had them all in one place. So if you go back to the home screen, you can see that we've got quick links to each of them, or you can take the whole thing as a module and import that out to your students. All right. And you can also, again, continue to customize this. So I have a really extensive orientation in my courses that's two parts, both orienting them to Canvas and then orienting them to my class. So using these same ideas and the templates, I have additional activities that they do that help them prepare for my class specifically. So where to find different things in Canvas that we're going to be using, where to find their books for the course, because I use all OER, you know, those kinds of things are all part of my student orientation process. The next thing that we did, obviously, like we said at the very beginning, we wanted to make sure that we had something that instructors could just jump right into teaching the course. And so we took all of these things that we built. We used the best practices for equity design to guide us. And we used the templates that we had created. All of those things came together in creating the actual plug and play course. So hopefully you're seeing my screen, and you can see here, as I mentioned, we put together a very robust week 1 orientation for students. So it has all of the things that we felt we needed to include to orient them and prepare them for this virtual class space. And so someone teaching a face-to-face class could use as much or as little of this as they wanted, right? And then we move through an entire first, how many weeks did we do, Julio? Did we do 12?
I want to say we did.
Okay, and
Because
I'll talk a little bit.
We did the majority of the major assignments.
Yes. So what we did for the plug and play course was we took the major assignments that are part of the English 1A COR, and we developed full weekly modules for those. So the student comes in, or the instructor comes in, and there is an overview page already created using the template, hyperlinked to everything in the unit. All they would have to do is go in and add their deadlines. And you can see we even left spaces so that you can't even forget, right? Like there's a blank here to remind you to go ahead and put the deadline there for students as well. And so everything they need, and then it moves the students through the content using the next button. So everything that you would want for that module, for that unit, is all together, and we divided it up weekly. But as we were saying, we did not do an entire course. So the thought was we wanted to make sure that we got someone started on the right foot, but eventually at a certain point, an instructor would be able to start taking over and creating their own materials using what they've learned as a model. So we've got everything that you need all the way through to the research essay. So it covers all of the major points on our COR, but it leaves them a few weeks to design on their own. And we really wanted to make sure that everyone had something that they would need to run the class, but they would also sort of be encouraged to continue to do their own design. So if you have an instructor that's picking this up because they are in that situation where they get assigned the class right before classes start, or they're asked to pick up an extra 9-week class or something like that mid-semester, and they don't have a ton of time for prep, everything that they need to get started is available. They can just drop this into a Canvas shell and it's all there ready to go. And then let's see, I don't think there's anything else in the plug and play to show, and I'm not sure if I'm missing anything in the chat that I should be.
No, but Jackie, if you don't mind, on the syllabus, would you mind just clicking on like contact info, just so we can...
Absolutely. So with the syllabus portion, we have the sample. What we did was we, both Julio and I found that we do this in our classes. And so we created a template so that other folks, if they wanted to do the same thing, all of the pieces were already there. And so we take the idea, the things from our syllabus and we put them into our orientation module. So there's an about page, and then there's also a contact info page. And like, for example, at one of my first FCC workshops, Sally taught me how to make a button for Canvas, like she has on the resources and templates page. And so I have this contact info page that's part of the module, but I also have a button on my homepage for all of my classes that says contact me. And so if they want to contact me, it takes them to this page and it talks about the different ways that they can contact me. These are my office hours. This is my email. This is my phone number. And you can see in the plug and play course, we were really careful to go through, and anywhere that the instructor would need to edit it, we either highlighted or we left intentional blanks, like you saw with those dates, that that are reminding the instructor, like, this is stuff that you need to fill in. So an instructor who takes this course could simply scroll through using the next button and edit each page and add their personal information. And so it's got that beautiful, consistent look. It's not going to look like it's patched together from a bunch of different places. And it also has reminders so that they can do their personalization as they move through the plug and play.
Thank you, Jackie. I do want to underscore one of the great things that came out of that was we had the opportunity to kind of norm our material in a way that's not usual, I think, for faculty. We were able to then see what worked, as Jackie was saying, we were able to see what we did in a similar way and kind of fine tune our own individual material from there.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to chime in here and say a little bit. I'm kind of have an outside perspective. You know, like I said, my discipline is not English. I did make one of these courses for linguistics, and I have it shared on Canvas Commons. If you are dying to see it, it has nowhere near the bells and whistles that this thing is. It's just simply like a straight resources page. It doesn't have HTML code in it or anything like that, or even the equity stuff. It just has assignments basically in it. And it's used by most of the instructors in our district that teach linguistics. Anyway, so I have this perspective of creating something that is used by another discipline. Okay, I feel like English is a little bit unique in that, you know, of course there are a specific objectives and outcomes, you know, that are found on the COR. However, each English 1A instructor comes to the course with their own themes, their own articles, their own novel, short stories that they bring. And it would not be possible for this course or for a group of 5 random, you know, us instructors to impose or even like suggest, here, teach this novel, or here, teach these, you know, this theme. That just wouldn't fly in the English department because everybody has their own thing that they teach. That is the culture of the English department, the culture of the discipline. That's just how it is. So that may have been some of the reason why this work was a little bit difficult to kind of get into, and why it took us a little while to grapple with this, because while we had a lot of materials, you know, all 5 of us had a ton of materials, we had to kind of strip it down to just covering those objectives, and that was a little bit difficult. So that's something to think about. The the culture of your department and your discipline, and exactly how much academic freedom you have and how much academic freedom the instructors will accept, and how versus how much guidance you want to give them, because I think that that's definitely something that needs to be talked about and thought about from the beginning. It's not going to be the same for every single department. This is something to think about. The other thing to think about is, we use, like I said, we used a lot of openly licensed materials, a lot of OER, a lot of free materials. There's a lot of materials that I found, that we all found, that are free on the web. And that is, again, that's the nature of English. You can Google almost anything and find a free article on it on any topic. It's very easy to do that. And so again, that is kind of the nature of the English discipline. So we were not limited in that way, and some other disciplines may be limited in that way. So these are some questions that that you need to kind of think about if you're going to be creating a course in this way.
Thank you, Sally. Yeah, it's like everything else when you're teaching, you kind of have to recreate your knowledge, right? So now that we're on the other side of making this, we had to get together and talk about like how did we sort of muddle our way through this process, because it definitely was a muddle before we actually really hit our stride and decided what this was going to be. And so that reminded me of something that I set up at the top, which was, we were making this not just for new instructors, but for continuing instructors, right? So if you have been teaching, say, the same lesson to convey X for a while and you're looking for something new, we also wanted to make sure that this included resources that, would get someone excited about new potential, new ways to teach a topic. And so Sally showed earlier that we had, for example, several different pages in the resources template, which hopefully you're seeing on my screen now. But we had several different pages for teaching reading. We also had several different model units, right? That someone could go in and they could look at how someone else was teaching the unit on a response essay, or the unit on a book length text is one of our requirements on our COR. And then we also had some advanced things that we had designed in other capacities for our English 1A classes that have co-requisites attached. And these were just cool resources that we wanted to include. So this isn't stuff that we built specifically for this, but we brought it in. We thought, that's something that would be really helpful. And so we have, for example, Mastery Paths, which is a little bit of an advanced Canvas tool where students can work through a topic. And if they are struggling with it, it actually sends them back to review. And if they get it on the first try, it moves them forward right away. And so since these can be a little trickier to build, we have samples of these in the resource page as well. So things like a tabbed page, things like a mastery path that are maybe sort of advanced Canvas user level stuff, we wanted to make sure we were sharing models of those with faculty as well. So they may not necessarily be embedded into the plug and play course, but we included them on the resources. So for example, this is a self-contained lesson. So you would need to take this entire module, but it gives the students a pretest, and based on their score, it gives them a certain amount of review to do. And then they do a post test to move on to the next module. And so in addition to the orientation, we had things like the sample mastery paths. We have, we tried to follow our own, best practices for accessibility. So nothing in here is on a PDF because PDFs are the enemy of screen readers. So we wanted to make sure that everything was something that was going to be accessible. There's a great new tool for those of you that haven't seen it yet in Canvas, but you can actually have a page read to you through the immersive reader. And so if you're worried about what does your page look like, I highly recommend what does this look like to a student who's using a screen reader. It's really instructive to see what your page will actually look like to a student. We tried to make sure that we were going through and using the accessibility checker. So as you are editing a page, you will see here this accessibility checker icon. And if there are accessibility issues in your design, little numbers will pop up next to him and let you know how many issues. So we really went through and tested this material before we put it in the final stage to try and eliminate as many of those issues as possible. And so that's sort of another benefit of working as a team and creating this, is that now anyone that takes from it, those steps have already been done, right? We've already gone through, we've already used consistent formatting, we've already done accessibility checks and those sorts of things. So all of that is taken care of. All right, so we are at our time for the presentation. Team, are there any final thoughts you want to share before we jump to the Q&A?
Nope, just that this was really an awesome experiment, if you will, in collaborative work with other faculty members in our department. And it was work that we did for the benefit of our students and fellow faculty members, not because we're trying to, you know, have a standardized version of teaching, but because we want our students and our faculty members to have resources. We try to do that as much as possible, right? I will say this though, you learn a lot from doing something like this. Even today, I've already jotted down like 5 different things that I would change in 5 different pages that we looked at, because you don't really, quote, see them until you're experiencing them, right? We do have questions though, Jackie, so if you're ready, we can roll into those.
Yes, and I just wanted to say, the reason we did this in Canvas as classes instead of Canvas Commons is so you can see it. So you will know exactly what it's going to look like. Canvas Commons won't always show you what the final product is going to look like until you import it into your class. So that's why we did not put this on Canvas Commons. Okay, so questions. And I'm sorry, if someone can help me, I do not see. We'll try and look for the raised hands in the participant tab. If you have a question, you want to raise your hand. Okay, I see one hand raised now. That's me trying to raise my hand. Oh, Emily.
Hi, yeah, so I'm wondering, going to the very beginning, how do you get an extra course in Canvas? Like I have a sandbox, but let's say I want to have multiples, basically sandboxes for each of my courses. So like as I'm going through the semester and I know I need to change something, but I don't want to change it in the current course, don't want to change something and a student goes back and gets confused. Is there a way to do that where I can have multiple, basically like sandbox courses?
Well, let's see. I saw Jason Thomas is with us. Jason, do you have an answer to that question?
Yeah, you can make a ticket in the virtual hub for faculty.
And is it that easy? Did you get one or multiple?
Yeah, I do have a couple of sandboxes.
Yes.
They'll ask you why you want the sandbox, and this is totally a reason that would be valid. And so yeah, you just make a ticket in the virtual hub for faculty, and they'll contact you with more questions on why you want the sandbox, and then eventually it'll get created. There's no automatic process though.
We made the pitch for using a sandbox this way. And so anyone that follows us, you can say like, I'm creating a sample course for my department, like the English department did. And hopefully they're like, oh yeah, we remember putting that together, because we've already been through that step of sort of justifying why Canvas is the best place to house this kind of material. All right. Sorry, co-hosts, I'm having a really hard time seeing hands. Does anyone else have a question? Sevasti?
Hi, if you if we want to look at this sample course that you've presented to us today more carefully, where can we find it? Or can we find it?
Right. So because this sample course was created for the English department, it is not public. So if there is something specific that you would like from the course, like if you would like to see specific parts of it, I can actually send those pages out to you. If you're not sure, we can always set up a meeting and we can look over it a little bit together, and then you can tell me what you want. Just reach out to me via the email that is on the screen, unless your questions are specifically about OER for your course, in which case email Sally. So
Okay,
general
and-
questions about the course, email me. General requests.
And you're Jacqueline.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes. And I can put my email in the chat again.
And then I think Marjorie has a question. Marjorie, do you want to just go ahead and say your question?
Yeah, I have a question. The question is that I know a lot of us are not very techy with like, I don't know, like data, like when you guys have like the links and the HTML and all that stuff. Who did you ask for help if you run into a problem where for some reason the link is not working or you don't know how to even put the link there? Like, do you guys have a go-to that you email in Fresno City College or?
Google. That's what I do. It was the fastest way, because you could, of course, do a help ticket. You can reach out to various people on our campus, but I needed answers immediately as I was working on those pages, and Google was the best resource I found.
Honestly, there's
so many videos.
There's a lot of nerds out there that like
Yeah.
to make videos, like little short, like 2-3 minute videos showing you how to do all this stuff. I don't know, they like doing it, and YouTube videos, they're like right there. Yeah, www.youtube.com is like the best. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say most of us are self-taught. If there is something really specific that you can't find, then I would reach out to Su Yang, our instructional designer. And but for the most part, all of the design that you see here is things that we had picked up over the years from other instructors, or we Googled it and taught ourselves how. David is our real techie tech person, and he did some things in the background that none of us know how to do, but I have had no problem taking, like, for example, I'm doing a new English 1B this semester, and so I was able to go in and copy and paste the formatting right into my class, and all the colors come through and that sort of thing.
Here's something interesting that I noticed about that, Jackie. All of my previous classes, because of the way that our campus is now running Canvas, close at the end of the semester. And so I can't go in there and edit and copy and paste specific HTML code. But on this resource page, because it's not a class, it's a sandbox, it's permanently open, I can still go in and copy the HTML code. Which is important, because I'm not about to go finding the code again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, reuse, reuse, reuse. All right, any other questions? Okay, I don't see any other raised hands. Hopefully I haven't missed anyone, but thank you.
We've got
all.
one.
Oh, sorry, Sevsti again?
Could you show us again very quickly where on the faculty page we can find those HTML codes?
Oh yeah, Julio, do you want to walk through that? I don't have that tab up. Let me stop. Yeah, I'm not sharing my screen right now.
Can you all see my screen?
No, still Jackie. Jackie.
Hold on a second.
And then Sevesti, can you please repeat your question?
We were very quickly shown how to go to the faculty page to find those HTML codes. So that
Got
we
you.
can
So
get the
this is,
template.
yes, it's under the resources and templates. So if you click
Oh, I
on,
think she wants the FCC website.
oh,
Yes.
got you. You mean these, the colors?
Yes. How did you get to there?
Got you.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of clicking. So the easiest way that I found is to just under the search, go to
I just put a
font
link in
or
the chat.
logo or anything, and it's the very first one that pops up.
I'll just put a link in the chat if you want to bookmark it.
Yeah. Say it again.
Oh, I just put a link in the chat if you want to just go there and
Yes.
bookmark it while you're here.
All
But that is
right.
where I found all of the HTML for the specific colors that are used at our campus.
Also has other
And
cool
I
things
will
like
say-
Zoom backgrounds.
Say it again.
It also has other cool things like Zoom backgrounds in
Yes,
the digital media section.
best practices, elements of style, all those things. Some of them, like the typography one, is not filled in, but you do have access to a couple of other really interesting things there. I will say this though, be thoughtful, even though these are the web color palettes, be thoughtful of how you use them. Some of these, if you use this specific shade of red with the black font on top of it, it is not going to be reader friendly. So.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming, for your attention, for your great questions. Again, if there's any part of this that you need shared, just please send me an email. I'll get all those requests together and start getting things sent out to everyone. English instructors, if you would like to be added as a teacher so you can use the full course, please send me an email also, because I wasn't quite able to capture all of the requests that were coming through. So if you email me, I will get on that. And we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming and spending this early hour with us. And hopefully we'll see you in some later sessions. Have a great semester, everyone.